So you can tell one major theme for the day is that word right now. Say with me, say fear. Fear. All right, fear. And what we're doing, we're in the middle of the series. It's a 3-week series that we're going to end next week, and it's called Death Valley. And it's based on probably the most overplayed, the most popular, the most famous section of the Bible. And it is Psalms 23. You probably, if this is your first time ever coming to church, I guarantee you there's elements of Psalms 23 you've heard about because it is just so popular and just people love it so much because it is super small, 6 verses, yet it is packed with so much hope and so much words of encouragement that it is not a coincidence why it is one of the most popular sections of the Bible. In fact, this is actually a song. We just heard a song a minute ago. And this song, or songs, is in the Bible, and it is Psalms 23, and it is a song that King David wrote. And this is his number one. So, David's one of those, he's not like one of those one-hit wonders, right? He's like, he was like the Justin Bieber back in the day, right? The Taylor Swift with the Jews. The guy, he was just popping out hits all the time. And so his probably number one chart topper, even today, is this one, is Psalms 23. And what we're looking at is we've been looking at it over the next, for about 3 weeks. We're going to wrap it up next week. And the biggest point of Psalms 23 is he talks about God's involvement in our lives when things don't go the way we would like them to go. And let me just say, right, that kind of happens, right? Or does life always, every time you pull up to a stoplight, it always turns green, right? One of those. That's only in a Disney movie, right? When the birds are all flapping around making the beds for you, right? Dressing you up. That don't happen in real life. Things don't always go the way you would want them to go. And so, what can we do during those moments? And especially, what is God supposed to do? Where is He during those dark times? And so, one of the things that we are looking at today, and we're breaking down the number one theme of the whole Psalms 23 is that opening statement when he declares, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And another way to say that, when David declares, "God is my shepherd," and he breaks down this image throughout all Psalms 23 of what this relationship is between shepherd and sheep. But when he says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," he is saying, God, I do not lack a thing because my God is my everything. Now, I know that's hard to say. I was like, wait, He's my everything, when I know that there's things that you need, right? You need to know, hey, I got financial needs, emotional needs. I got prayers that I need answered, bro. I was like, I don't know. I have questions and no answers. Or maybe you got an answer and you're confused about that answer. I'm like, wait a minute. What is that? How does that work? I don't know about that. And so all of those things, yes, God knows you need those things, guys, but there's a need deep down inside that you don't even realize you have. All right? And yes, out of all the needs that you have, I need you to understand this one thing. And God needs you to understand this one thing. Here's something this is how we ought to live in the valley. When we're going through life, and it's this bottom line that we've been saying for the whole series is this: cast your fears and cares on Christ, and He will carry you through because He cares about you. Cast all of your fears, your questions, your concerns. You can have them. You can bring them to Him. But bring them to Him, and when you cast all of them on Christ, He says, I want it all. And I will carry you through from where you are to where you really want to be and don't even know how to get there. I can carry you through because I care about you. I want you to know right there, you just remembered that God does care about me and that He can carry me through. That is the essence of Psalms 23, and that is what the Lord wants to show with you. But the one part of that is when we are in this valley, we have to confront. There's a reason why I said cast your fears and your cares, because when we walk through life, guys, fear is a natural part of it, and you will have to face fears from time to time. You have to. There's no denying those. And then we can be, and I'm not talking about some of y'all, look, you're afraid of a roach. Okay, I get it. Okay, one of those. Especially the roaches who fly. Those are from hell itself. Okay, right? Those are literally from the pits of hell. Okay, roaches that fly. I was like, the end of the world right there. Okay, that's apocalypse stuff. And so I'm not talking about little fears like that. I'm talking about the deepest questions and the deepest fears that we wrestle with. Fears like, will I always be alone? Fears of, do I matter? I'm afraid I don't matter. I'm afraid there's no value in me. The deepest fears. Can I make a difference in this world? Those fears. Those are the ones that we're going to tackle. And the thing is, guys, and I don't know if you're what you are afraid of. And there's some big fears that we have. There's some serious ones. And there's some others that are what they are, right? I mean, just maybe silly. Manifestations of something else. But what is fear? When we are afraid of something, what is it? Is it usually, and I love the way that the song outlined it, is that fear many times is a liar. And do you guys know that God gave us fear? Like, fear is something that He put in us, and that's a good thing. It's an actual emotion that God put in us. And it's the fear, when fear doesn't control you, fear can be very useful. Fear can make you stop and think and reflect. Fear can save you. It's a defense mechanism. And so God wired that. But there is a form of fear that goes beyond the limits of what God intended. It's the fear that cripples you. It's the fear that paralyzes you. It's the fear that gets you stuck in whatever valley that you may be walking through. And that's not the kind of fear that we have from God. It's different. It's a different one. But see, when we see things, right, there's sometimes a lot of things that we're afraid of. I mean, fear, like I said, it's a liar. Sometimes it amplifies things that aren't there, right? I guarantee you, if we could all write down your fears, right, and probably 90%, I'm going to even go even farther, probably 95% of the things that you are afraid of happening to you, do you know that will probably never happen? Think about that. The majority of the things that you are afraid of, like, I'm afraid of this happening to me, I'm afraid of becoming this, I'm afraid of this happening. The majority of the things that you were afraid of, if you really think about it, they hardly ever happen. But they suck so much of our life now in the present, when we're especially afraid of the future, right? It distracts us. It makes something that is not there either visible or whatever is there, it amplifies it, right? And then we misunderstand one thing for another, and it influences us. And it keeps us from being who God called us to be. Now, talking about something, kind of magnifying something that's not there. This is, I was thinking about this as I was praying today, or yesterday as I was getting ready. This last week, me and my wife, our family just got back from camping all week at Disney. All right, and now some people don't call that camping; they call that glamping, but whatever. I'm gonna call it camping. All right. Yes, we had running water. Yes, the bathrooms were clean. I don't care. Don't judge me. We have electricity. I'm fine. All right, whatever. We had Wi-Fi. Okay, so awesome. Okay, listen. No, but we had some gangster squirrels. Oh my gosh. So that's for another day. I'm gonna save those stories for another day. But see, we were camping all week at Disney. This is our family vacation that we had. And I was walking, we were on Friday. Friday we were at one of the parks. We were at Hollywood Studios, right? My wife's favorite park, our favorite park. And we were over there, and I had a backpack on, okay, because we had a lot of food. We had some leftover food. I had the ponchos. I mean, it's Florida, man. It's Florida. You never know. I mean, 2 seconds later, it's a monsoon. And then 2 seconds later, it's like beautiful, all right? It's paradise. And so I had my backpack packed full of stuff. And then I had a bucket of popcorn. And this bucket of popcorn that I had, it was, for the kids, whatever, $10 for the bucket. But it was like $1 to refill every time, so it was great. I thought it was a deal. So I had the bucket, and I would attach it to sections of my backpack, because I don't want to carry a bucket all day. And so I just had it attached to my backpack. But the thing is that no matter, sometimes on the way that I would move, and if you've ever been to a park, any park, right, it's super crowded. Right? I mean, does that bug any? I'm like, those are the worst. It was like when it's just super crowded, you're constantly bumping into people from all around the world. Like, and I don't know how many times you do that, but that happens. And that was happening to me, obviously. So I got my backpack on, I got my bucket, and it depends on. Sometimes I would get my bucket. If I would turn too fast, the bucket would swing around and hit me like right here in the arm, or the other way, it would swing around and hit me in the arm. But it didn't really hit me. It just kind of like tapped me. And so it felt like I was bumping into people. It felt like somebody was like, excuse me, like hitting me on the shoulder. And do you know how many times I apologized to myself? Do you understand how many times I apologized to myself when I got up and was like, boom, there goes the bucket. Oh, excuse me. Bucket. All right, and now I'm going to get up we just got from a ride. All right. Oh, excuse me. The bucket. Like every time, it's the bucket. Oh, man, I didn't, no matter where I did, I put it up up here, put it up here, put it up there, put it up there. You do not, I lost count how many times I apologized to myself. Excuse me, sir. Okay, I'm like, it was me, because I thought I was bumping into people, and I thought I was in their way, and they were telling me to shush. It was me, right? But to me, I don't know why I was thinking about that, because that's sometimes fear. Fear just kind of runs up on us and makes us think something that is there that really isn't there. You see that? And fear, and it could be a natural thing, and it just kind of amplifies something that is there, but it makes it a bigger deal. And we think something is there that it really isn't. And see, that's not the fear that we have. So here's the one thing, and I don't think it's a coincidence. Do you guys know that about this right here? I don't think it's a coincidence that the number one command in the Bible. Now, I'm not talking about the 10 Commandments, all right? These are the top 10 things, right? That God says, look, hey, try this, by the way. See how well you can hold up to these 10 rules and whatever. But I'm not talking about the top 10 commandments, which one of these does fall into one of those. Actually, it goes against the first one. But do you guys know the number one command in the Bible? By far. I mean, a runaway command. Some of you guys might know it, some of you guys might not. The second I say it again, oh yeah. Okay, look, it's this one. The number one command in the Bible is this. Repeat after me. Say, do not fear. That's it. The number one commandment, if you look at the many times the Lord, directly from the Lord, do not be afraid. 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 From the old to the new, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Why? Because fear is one of the most elemental, essential things that if it controls us, God knows. God knows that fear is the one thing that can keep us from experiencing victory in the valley. Fear. So that's why he constantly says, don't be afraid. Now, what he's saying is don't feel your emotions. That's not what I'm saying. Do you guys know that you can feel scared, but still not let fear rule you? You know what that's called? Courage. Courage. You know, if somebody who's brave, it isn't somebody who isn't scared. Somebody who's brave is someone who's courageous, is someone who's going to move past and not allow the fear that they're feeling to hold them back. Do you see the difference? So I'm not telling you, it is not a sin to be afraid. It is not a sin to fear. You fall into sin when you allow fear to rule you. Instead of, and again, which is amazing, how many times when you look at do not be afraid, you know what a lot of times the next commandment would follow? Be courageous. Because you know what fear does? It discourages us. Look at that. Discourage. What does that mean? Fear robs us of courage. And so that's why God will constantly say, don't be afraid. Instead of encourage yourself. Be encouraged. Be courageous. Because fear discourages us. And that's why we constantly say, cast those fears. When you have them, good. Don't hold them. Cast all of your fears and your cares on Christ, and he will carry you through because he cares about you. Now we're going to look at Psalms 23. Let's look at one verse today. Last week we talked about the opening. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Verse 1. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. And he leads me upon paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And so that was last week. But now, I want you to look at verse 4. We're only going to look at one verse today. Psalms 23, verse 4, and here's what it says next. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Probably one of the most iconic sections of the whole Psalms 23 is that right there. Now, what a scene change, right? Here he is in the opening scene. David, we see green pastures, still waters, paths of righteousness, valley of the shadow of death. It's like, whoa, what a scene change. And what's amazing is right before this verse, he says, you lead me upon paths of righteousness, which is upon paths of right living. But whoa, it turns out that path of righteousness has to lead through a valley from time to time. Guys, I want you to know that the green pastures and the deep valleys are a part of life. In fact, I can tell you right now, and you could probably testify and agree with me in saying, some of the most difficult moments in your life, though you wish they never happened, years later or sometime later, are you not grateful that they did? Maybe, and it can be hard. I know that can be super controversial what I just said. But for some things, when we go through some things, some of it is by our choices, consequences. But some of the most difficult circumstances is what shaped us into who we are. Things that didn't go our way. Answered prayers that were left unanswered. Or answered in the opposite way. And so, guys, life is about, yes, the green pastures and the mountaintops, but it is sometimes that path will lead through the valley from time to time. And though it's hard to understand in the moment, because in the deep, notice what Hebrews said, the valley of the shadow of death. You know what's another translation? It is in the deepest, darkest place. That's another way of that David describes that. The deepest, darkest place. That even though the good and the bad, and look what he even says at the beginning, even though, like he's going, look, this is a part of life. This will happen. And when these times happen, when I don't see green pastures, when I don't feel the still waters, and I'm in a deep valley, despite that, notice what does he say boldly? I will what? I will fear no evil, because he is with me. Because, Lord, you are with me. I love that David is very aware of his surroundings. Whether it's the pastures or the waters or the valley. David is very aware of his surroundings, but you notice that David is very aware also of who is with him. He is aware of where he is, but he's also aware of who is with him. And he says without a shadow of a doubt, God, I see you. You are with me. Now, despite this, even look when he says, the valley of the shadows of death, I will not fear. And again, that can be so many things. For some of us, for David, for us, even for me, those can be external forces, external things that are happening, situations that are beyond our control that cause fear or discouragement and worry in us. But sometimes those shadows are on the inside. They're things that we wrestle with. But he says, I will not fear this valley that is full of shadows. David knew a lot because David was a shepherd. And he was talking about the Lord as my shepherd. David was a shepherd before he was a king. And David many times would have to lead his sheep through a valley in order to get to the next green pasture. Now, why would he have to lead him through valleys? Because what if the valley was a shortcut? What if the valley was easier to get to where you would want to go, get to where you want to be? If you would have to go around the mountain, over the mountain, you might be discouraged because that was a lot harder rather than go through the valley. And so David knew the times. And he, as a shepherd, knew. Because in the valleys, if you've ever been in a valley, it's not like a mountaintop. There's limited visibility. And so if the light is over one of the walls, there's going to be areas that are dark, and sheep are dumb. Sheep don't know. And when sheep sees a shadow, their imagination goes wild, and they might see, what is lurking in the shadow? I can't see. And they get anxiety, and they panic, and sheep can freak out. Okay? And so he knew as a shepherd, he had to encourage those sheep to calm down and keep moving. Keep moving in the valley. Keep moving, because this is not where we're going to stop. The green pastures on the other end. Keep going, keep going. And he began to see that the Lord, that was his relationship with God. That every time he would feel something and see something and not know and call that anxiety or stress, or that would be caused externally or even internally, he would feel and see the Lord encouraging him the same way that he used to encourage his little sheep. But, and also, here's one thing about shadows. All right, okay, can we cut the lights real quick? I want to do one thing left. You can stay there. I want you to see this really fast. See how well this works. All right. Can y'all see the shadow? Can you see my shadow?
Yes.
All right, a little bit. Anybody used to do these little puppets? I can't really. There we go. Anybody do the bunny? All right, a little bunny rabbit. That's a giant, a bunny rabbit, a little. I can't do the birds with. Can I do? There you go. There you go. All right. Little birds. That's a horrible dog, but whatever. Okay, now, let me tell you something. As big as this ginormous bunny is, are any of you afraid of this ginormous bunny?
No.
Number one, why?
I can't see it.
Because I can't see it.
Well, you know it's me. But two,
Can't see the
a
bunny.
shadow. Oh, you can't see the thing?
No.
I
Better?
do it on the screen.
Put on the white.
There.
There we go. All right. You see this? Guys, can a shadow
Actually, looks like a
Can a shadow hurt you?
No.
Shadows can't hurt you. The shadow cannot hurt you. Now, a shadow proves that there's something there, though. Now, that could hurt you. But there was something about David as he walked through the valley of these shadows. And these shadows would rear up and maybe look a little scarier than this, whatever, I don't know. And it would, rise up at him, maybe around him. And he knew that, hey, whatever that shadow is, I'm not afraid because God is with me. You know what also?
Amen.
The fact that there is a shadow, you know what the shadow is also proving simultaneously? The sun, the light. Guys, can you have a shadow without light? No. So even in the darkest, deepest valley, why is he unafraid? He sees the shadows, but what is the shadow also a reminder of? The light of God that is with him. He sees the shadow only because the light reveals it. And he knows that greater is the light than the shadow. Can we put some of the lights back on? The light is more powerful than the shadow. And so that was one of the things why he said, look, I see that. I see it. But I'm going to walk through this valley because the light is more powerful than this shadow. My God is bigger than whatever that is. And I am not going to be afraid. I'm not going to let fear rule me. Instead, I'm going to push through. And guys, sometimes there's so many of us, man, we waste a lot of time because we put our focus on the shadow instead of putting our focus on the light, which is right there, simultaneously right there. And David, this is what David is saying, look, I see the shadow, but my focus isn't on the shadow, my focus is on the light. And when we see those things, guys, whatever the lies are, whatever we are wrestling with, it's one thing to recognize it. We must recognize it. We must own up to it. We must face it. But at the same time, we don't surrender to it because we are surrendering to the light, to our God who is bigger and greater than anything that we can ever deal with. Because that is real. That is true. And so notice he then goes, he says in Psalms 23, he says, I will walk through the valley, right, of the shadow of death, and I will fear no evil, because what? You are with me. And then he says, your rod and your staff. What do? They comfort me. Your rod and staff, they comfort me. Now this, you might pass this because you don't maybe get a rod or a staff. Okay, they're by the way, two different things, not two of the similar things. And David knows this because he was a shepherd. So if unlike, back then maybe everybody knew a little bit more, shepherding was kind of thing. And so, a staff and a rod might not even be a big deal because I want to stop for a minute because this one's huge. You got to get this. See, a staff is something that when you think of a shepherd, you think of a staff, right? And what does a staff look like? A big candy cane, right? Like that. You get that? You ever imagine that when you think of a shepherd? Right? You got a big long stick, super tall, and it has a hook on the end. And they make them like that with this little hook. And usually it could be a little sharp or a little pointy end on the other side. But this was meant not just for the shepherd to kind of do a little walking stick, okay, not like that. This was a tool that the shepherd would use to deal with the sheep. And so a staff was super important. Super important. I mean, the staff and the rod, two separate things that were essential, okay, to be a shepherd. And the staff would be this massive thing so you can get sheep's attention a lot of time. It was really long, so usually if one of the sheep was kind of going off to the side, you can kind of, lean out or, tap that sheep back or kind of, bring them back if they're kind of going out of bounds or whatever, right? And so you can use that. But what was the hook for? The hook was meant for every time a sheep would wander, which they always would, and a sheep wouldn't see where they were going, not paying attention, and they would trip and fall and fall down a hill or fall into a little ditch or a cave or be afraid to come out of a corner of whatever else. And so the hook, the staff was meant, and the hook was meant to literally hook that sheep and to lift it up, to rescue any wandered sheep, to rescue and to get out and take us any stuck sheep to be brought out. That's what the hook is for. And David, as he realized there was plenty of times that if you read the Bible, you can see them. David himself made plenty of mistakes. David found himself in ditch after ditch and cave after cave over and over again because of his mistakes or because of people wanting to hurt him or do whatever else. And so here he is, he would fall into depression or fall into the ditch of fear or whatever it was. Or sometimes he was so ashamed of his sin that it was hard to expose himself before the Lord. It was hard to be in God's presence. And so he would see that there was this hook that the Lord had. That every time he had fallen, he saw this God who was trying to lift him up out of it. And he says, no, I don't want to leave you there. I want to bring you closer to me. I'm going to hook you in. And it was the love of God that would do that. constantly. Now the rod was different. The rod was unlike the staff, which the staff was tall. The rod was smaller, maybe medium-sized stick. This one didn't have a hook on the end. It had kind of like a ball, okay? Like a little ball like that. Not that ball, this ball. Okay, and so it was this kind of a ball. And so he had a ball on the edge of the stick. And this ball, what it meant was, and this was, usually this, whatever else. This was not meant to rescue sheep, right? To hook them or whatever else. This was now an offensive weapon. So if there was, and by the way, the shepherds would have slingshots too. That's why David was so good with the slingshot. But if he didn't have the slingshot, he had this, two-edged thing. He had the hook, that staff, and the rod. And the rod was meant to beat back anything that was trying to come against and try to come into sheep. Whatever it was, a lion or a wolf or a bear, whatever it was, that rod was meant to beat back everything. And here David sees, not only does God love me so much, that he's willing to, that he has lifted me over and over again, hooked me with his love, and brought me out of the deepest, darkest places in my mind and my soul. Yet that same God has a rod that is beating back the shadows of depression in my life. I see him beating back the shadows of fear and of worry and of anxiety. I see him beating back these negative thoughts that I wrestle with and my insecurities. This Lord beats back all of those things. Amen. And so that's why he would say, Lord, your staff, your rod, they comfort me. It makes me feel good. I'm in this dark valley, yet I know I'm not afraid. Because if I fall, you're there to scoop me up. And if something sneaks up behind me and I don't see it, you're there to beat it back. You're there to beat it back. I trust you. I see that you are there. And you guys know what the staff and the rod is of the Lord? You know what the staff and the rod is? His left and right arm. It's his arms. His arms. When David would sometimes feel like, I have sinned too much, I have fallen out of the reach of his God, there he would see his God reach a little bit more and scoop him up. And he would see that there was the arms of his God brought comfort to him and didn't allow fear or confusion to overwhelm him. Been plenty of times, guys. I know some of you know it. You know your own experiences, and I've seen them as well with God. Sometimes I think that I've sinned too far, and I'm now disqualified from the love of God, and yet there it is. It reaches just a little bit farther than I thought he ever could, and boom, he scoops me back up. There's been plenty of times I've fallen into ditches, and I'm like, all right, this is way too deep. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this one. And there's the love of the Lord. And realize that even though the deepest, darkest tunnel, like Paul even declared, there is nothing that can separate me from the love of God. Because it saves me, and rescues me, and lifts me up no matter what. And when I struggle with things, and when I go in prayer to the Lord, and I cast my fears and cares on him, there he is, and what I was struggling with, I'm no longer struggling with, because it's the Lord that is beating back the things and protecting my heart, protecting my mind. That's why it's so important, guys. That's why he wants you. He says, do not be afraid. Instead, give me your fears. Cast your fears. Cast your cares on me. I will carry you through. I care about you. I will protect you. I can help you because I love you. And guys, in those moments of the deepest, darkest valleys, in those moments when we have the questions and we don't see an answer, those are the moments that we need to remember this love of God, that his arms are so outstretched that there is nothing that he can't do or undo. And that should bring comfort to us and not hold us back. This week, I saw my 9-year-old grow up in the middle of Normandy in Epcot, right in front of Frozen Ever After. Okay? I saw my 9-year-old take a step. Very much like when I saw him take his first steps. Right? And you ever see, with a kid, like when there's a certain time, when you hit a level, you don't tend to go back. Right? And so when you can start walking, you don't just then, okay, you know what, that was fun for 2 seconds, I think I'm content crawling. Right? No, the kids, when they can take one step, they'll take two, they take three. And now when they learn how to walk, I didn't see none of y'all crawling here. Right? And so if you know how to walk, if you can walk, you're going to walk. Right? Same thing with potty training. The second you learn how to do number 2 and whatever inside of the toilet, you're not gonna just revert back. It was fun having that. I think it was okay. So when you hit a level, you hit that level, right? And so I saw my 9-year-old grow up, okay, in the middle of Normandy, right in front of Frozen Ever After, in Epcot at Disney. Reason is because he's talking about his mind and who he is. He oversees and overthinks every scenario way too much sometimes, which is a good thing and it also can be a bad thing. And number one, the one thing he does the most is his rides. And so like he has 3 categories. Like, look, I'll ride anything as long as it doesn't have 3 things: height, speed, and thrill. So his favorite ride forever was the People Mover at Disney, because it goes from 2, it's like, super slow, and he's like, I got 3 categories: height, speed, thrill. I don't want to do any of those, okay? I mean, he swears, he thinks the 1,001 ways that he's gonna die in everything. And so here he is, and he's been struggling, and we would go, and sometimes we're contemplating not having a pass, because we're like, man, we shouldn't bring him, just so we can sit and writer swap all day. That's annoying. And so he goes, and he was, he had this one ride that he was really looking forward to that had speed and thrill, and it was Test Track. I don't know if you've ever ridden Test Track. It goes really fast, 67 miles an hour. And so we were gonna go ride Frozen Ever After because the line was short, and right then we're gonna go to Test Track. And he goes, whoa, which one? Frozen Ever After. I was like, no, I don't wanna ride that. Why? I was like, no, girl. I was waiting, no, I don't wanna ride that. I was like, why? Because I saw on YouTube that it goes backwards at one point, and it slides down, and I don't want to do that. I'm too scared. I don't want to do that. I was like, it's Frozen Ever After. If there's one thing, the one thing that you're not going to be not afraid of is Frozen Ever After in Disney. Okay, that's the last thing that you need to be afraid of. And he was panicking. Me and him wrestled for 2 seconds in front of Frozen Ever After. Legit, he got strong on me for a minute. I'm like, wait, he got strong. He hit a level of, I didn't know he can be like that. We wrestled for 2 seconds. I had to let him go because people were about to break it up. It was weird. People were confused. And then I took him down, and I kind of got to his eye level, put my hand on my shoulder, Frozen Ever After. Frozen Ever After. You're scared because it's gonna go. It's like 5 feet. I was like, what is the deal? And I was like, no, Daddy, no. And I'm like, wait, right, Test Track, we can do nothing. And I'm like, I'm frustrated. I'm like, no, I'm sick of this because he was overthinking things so much. We had to throw him inside of Winnie the Pooh one time.
Yes.
Because he was like, oh, it's dark.
Yes.
It's Winnie the Pooh. I'm like, what? No. We remember, Disney's gonna get us for child abuse at some point. They're gonna see that. And so he was so scared, and I had it. I was done. I'm like, no, because he would miss out. He was missing out on something that I knew he was gonna like, but he was letting fear rule him. And I remember I sat there and I had my hand on his shoulder. I was like, look, man, this is it. I was like, when are you gonna concentrate? And I was like, I wasn't like, talking down to him. I was talking to him. I was trying to encourage him. But I was, really stern, like some tough love. And at one point he interrupts me. And he's fine. I thought he was talking back. Inside I'm like, whoa, what? I was like, what do you, wow. I'm like, what do you mean? I thought he'd talk back. He didn't really talk back like that. I grew 8 inches a minute. Like, what did you say? I was like, that's what I wanted to do. But he just said, fine. And I went, what? I said, fine, do it. I said, why? Okay. Get it. Embarrassing in front of this is normal. This is the happiest place on earth. You guys looking all crazy. So we went in line. Got in line. He wrote it. He says, I want mom. Was it mom? Was it you? It's like, I want mommy next to me, and I want mommy to hold me. It's like, fine, whatever it is, I'm gonna go. And he went. He rode the ride. And he loved it. The one point he was afraid of, he goes, wee. All that for nothing. And so then he goes and rides Test Track the next one. Oh, loved it. And then we went to the next part. In the next 2 days, he went undefeated. Wow. Rides that he never rode, and we would do rider swaps. He never rode because he was too afraid. He rode it and would ride out, and then went on the next one, and went on the next one, went on the next one. And the hardest one was when we went to Rock and Roller Coaster, because that one is in the dark, and it has he says it has, I saw it on YouTube. I was like, oh, stop watching YouTube. I saw it on YouTube, Daddy. It goes in a loop, and I don't want to go upside down. I'm like, no, it's a corkscrew. It was like, it is a corkscrew. And I forgot. I was like, no, it doesn't have a pull. If a roller coaster has a pullover, that means you're going to go upside down. It has a lap bar. We show up, I was like, Daddy, it has a pullover. I was like, I ignore it. Oh, crap. Oh, I forgot. And I was like, that's fine. And he was nervous. I was like, I don't know. And then I was like, oh, but I'll do it. Okay. And so he was walking, and it was him and me. He sat down next to me. The second he sat down, I was like, wait, Daddy, I don't think I'm going to do it. Before he finished that sentence, I grabbed his lap bar and went, blank, too late. And then stuck now, too late. And we went from that, it's a launch roller coaster, 0 to 60 or whatever in 2 seconds, into a 360 loop in the dark, out the gate. I thought he was going to die. And so, but he did it. And he, at the end he was crying, but then he was like, I'll do it again. I'll do it again. And so, but the thing was, I said, I saw him grow up. I know where that spot is. I saw him grow up right at the entrance line at Normandy at Frozen Ever After, because he finally said, fine, I'm done. I'll do it. He was scared, but the one thing, every ride that he rode that we never rode before, what he always asked? All right, Mom, look, or Dad, look, I just want your arm around me and that's it, I'm good. As long as your arm's on me, I'll be fine, I can do it. Why? Because it comforted him. It reminded him, I'm not alone, Mom and Dad are here, I can do this. That's David. That's David. When he says, the rod and staff, they're your right and left arms. They comfort me. They remind me that you're there. And I've seen you rescue me before, and I've seen you defeat enemies in me and around me. And if I just know that heavy arm of yours is right there on me, I can make it through this battle. I can make it through this battle. And now, before he actually told me, he was like, Dad, I felt like I've missed out on so much because I was so afraid. I was like, that's a big time. We said we knew you were going to love it. And so, and guys, how many times have I'm afraid, talking about being afraid, I'm afraid to actually know how much I've missed out on because I let my fear, I allowed myself to be discouraged instead of encouraged, And so this is what the Lord desires us to do. He wants to remind us that we're there. In fact, let me look, we're not only looking at Psalms 23, but we're also looking at John 10. Let me quickly show you John 10, verses 11 through 15. We've been looking now, Jesus declared hundreds of years later, now Jesus is standing in front of people in the same country that David declared, the Lord is my shepherd. Now here Jesus himself is standing before everyone declaring, I am the good shepherd. I am that shepherd. And not just a shepherd, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, when he sees wolves coming, and he leaves the sheep and flees. And when the wolf snatches them and scatters them, he flees because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. But I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay my life down for the sheep. Here we see David. This God saying, look, I want you to be encouraged. I don't want you to fear. Because I ain't no hired hand, Jesus says. God is telling us, I am not a hired hand. A hired hand is just somebody, right? Just an employee, right? I'm going to hire you to watch my sheep for me. But if the sheep aren't yours, right, this is just a job to you. You see a wolf, you see a lion, right, you're going to take off. It's like, look, I'll flip burger somewhere else. I'm done with this. They got wolves here. And so I'll do something. I don't care. All right? And so a hired hand doesn't care about the sheep. He only cares about himself. The hired hand only focuses on doing a job and earning his check and going home. That's a hired hand. But a shepherd knows that the sheep is more valuable than just the paycheck that I get. It is my livelihood, it's my family, it's this, it's that. It is important to me. And so he says, look, God is saying, I ain't no hired hand. If things happen to you, if things come at you, you ain't gonna see me turn around. God is saying, I am the good shepherd, and I lay my life down for the sheep. This is the thing I want to encourage you with today, guys. Look, for the enemy to get to the sheep, he has to go through the shepherd first. For the enemy to get to the sheep, he has to go first through the shepherd. And God is saying, anything that's ever going to come at you, if you are in my flock, if you put your trust in me, and you look to me, and I am the Lord your God, your shepherd, anything that's going to come at you has to go through me first. Has to go through me first. And that ought to bring some gratefulness and joy to your heart to know that this is the God. This is the kind of shepherd that's rolling with us. And this is why he says, do not be afraid. Because your enemy has to go through the shepherd to get to the sheep. He has to go through me to get to you. And with me, it's like, man, I lay my life down. It's like, I ain't going anywhere. I'm giving it all And by the way, this is Jesus before. He proved it by dying on the cross and literally and truly laying his life down for us. And so guys, see, Jesus, our God, is not one to run from a fight because the fire of his love for us is just too hot for him to do otherwise. It's too hot for him to do otherwise. And so if we can go back to Psalms 23:4, I want you to look at this one last thing. Because this is the one thing, if you realize who this God is, when you realize that the arms of the Lord are a staff to rescue you, to lift you up, and to protect your mind, your heart, from whatever negativity and things that you're dealing with, whatever it is, right? He's there. When you understand that he's there to comfort you, right? Here's the one thing that David declared, right? It's at the very beginning. What is he doing in the valley? He's walking. He's walking in the valley. You know what the valley is not meant for? Setting up camp. You're not meant to set up camp inside the valley. You're called to walk through it. There's plenty of times I've stayed way too long in certain valleys. In valleys of insecurity, valleys of negativity, valleys of whatever else you can fill in. I've stayed way too long because instead of walking through it, instead of dealing with it, I set up camp and I owned it. And I was like, well, I began to believe the lie instead of believing in the truth of who God says I am, of who he says he is. I've wasted too much time setting up camp inside the valley. And David knows, hey, this valley is just a part of the process. I'm not setting up camp here. I am walking through this deep darkness. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in a dark room, okay? We probably do one or two things. You're probably one or two people. Are you the type that just kind of runs a little extra fast, right? Because you're like, well, just run. If it's dark, you just want to get through it quicker. You know, the room that I used to hate walking in, back in our old church building, was the church, the sanctuary. For whatever reason, I felt like when church lights were off, like demons were everywhere. It was like, I don't know why. It was weird. It was just like I would like run super fast inside of it when the church building, all the lights were off, and it was just the red exit sign. You know, I don't know if it was just dark and I just saw red. I just ran. I don't know. I just hated that. Or my grandma. My grandma had this spooky room that no one would want to go in. We'd just run by it really fast and turn on the lights super quick. Just do it. I don't know. It was just we didn't want to know what was in there. I don't know. And so I don't know if you're that person. If it's dark, you either run extra fast, or if it's dark, you walk extra slow. Right? Because you're like, I don't want to make sure I'm not seeing anything. Yeah, you know. But see, David, while he's walking, he has this confidence. I walk through this valley. He is declaring that I'm in a valley, I'm in a dark place, but he's already through faith declaring, I'm going to make it through. I'm going to make it through. I'm going to make it through because, not because of me, it's because the God who is here with me. I'm going to make it through because of him. In fact, I got one last thing, Bob. I'm going to need you now for this one. So, all right. Let's shut the lights off one more time. Can we black out everything? Okay. All right. Black out everything as we can. Okay. No. Oh. All right. Let's see. All right. Here's a little. There we go. Oh, a little shadow of death there. Okay. See that? All right. So, I want you to see this. See, David. So David would see every time I would see. Though I walk through this valley and I see whatever this is, this intimidating figure of fear, intimidating figure of depression, of anxiety, of insecurity, of worry, of stress, whatever it is, he said, I will not fear because the Lord is with me. David knew this one thing, that what is the one thing that can cancel and that can beat back a shadow? Is life. David knew that he sees the shadow, but he is speaking light to the shadow. He's speaking truth. I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, but I declare truth. I will not fear evil because the Lord is with me. The Lord is encouraging me. His staff and his rod, they comfort me, they protect me. And so, guys, you see, what am I doing with this light? I'm poking holes in the light. I'm poking holes in the shadow. Guys, you cannot fight the lie if you don't know the truth. You can't fight lies if you don't know the truth. But when you know the truth and when you see your enemy rise up, you can poke holes through the lie. You can see right through it for what it is, a lie. And when you declare, this is what you need to do. When you see anxiety and fear and things rise up, just begin to, when you hold on to the truth and you shine that light, it's like, no, the Lord is with me. I will not fear. Greater is in me than who is against me. When you hear and you fear, it's like when the voice of anxiety says, I will always be alone. You hold up the truth and say, no, my God says he will never forsake me or leave me. When you say here, I am not loved, you say, no, for God loved me. He did not give me a spirit of fear, but gave me a spirit of a sound mind and of love. And so when you know these things, you're like, I can't do it. I can't do this. You hold up the truth to that line and said, but the Lord, there is nothing impossible that the Lord can't do in me and through me. That's what you need to do. Can we turn the lights back on? That is what you need to do, is shine that light. And when you see the shadows of insecurity, when you see whatever shadow rise up in you, you cast the light, you show the light of the truth of God. That's why last week we declared this application was to dine daily on the Word of God. I hope if you didn't do it, then guess what? You got another week to do it. Dine daily on the Word of God. Because in Psalms 23, when he declared green pastures, still waters, paths of righteousness, and when he declared the shadows, he was also saying, declaring the light that is present because of him. All of those things, light, the green pasture, still waters, paths of righteousness, light in the darkness, all of that, guess what it is? It's the truth of God. It is who he is, what he says. In fact, I'm going to read Psalms 20, I'm going to read it super quick, Psalms 43:3. David then declares, send out your light and your truth. Let them lead me. They will bring me to your holy hill, your dwelling place. Let the light and your truth lead me. He knew that he was going to make it through this valley because it was God who was guiding him, God who had his back, God who was walking next to him, God who was walking before him, and he knew that the light of his love and truth was going to lead him to where he needed to be. It was going to lead him into his destiny. And so my encouragement to you today is the same one that is the number one commandment in the Bible. Do not be afraid. Don't let fear rule you. Don't hold on to fear. Instead, cast all your fears. Cast all your cares on to Christ. He can carry you through whatever valley. And then you can say, look, my circumstances are not what they ought to be. My circumstances, I wish they were better. But I'm declaring that I'm going to make it through because the God who is with me, the God who I choose, who I've placed my faith in. Guys, listen, God isn't going to do things. He's going to do more for you than you deserve. And you know that the Lord has been doing things for you despite many of you even not having fully committed your life to Him. Because He loves you too much and He hopes that His kindness will win you over, for Him to see how good He has been despite our bad attitudes. But He can do so much more. When God isn't just something that it's not more than a hashtag, more than just a thing that you visit on a weekend. When He becomes Lord of your life, then fear will never rule you ever again. You won't have to fear like my son missed out on so much because of fear. When you realize that you are a son and daughter of the living God, when you place your faith in Him, He places more than just His arm on you. He places His Spirit in you. He places that light in you. Casting out whatever shadows around you, whatever the darkest, deepest shadows in you, He can help you overcome that. And like Jesus declares, see, I lay my life down for my sheep. You know why He laid His life down? So that you will no longer have to live in fear. Jesus laid His life down so you wouldn't have to live in fear. Live in fear of your past. Whatever the lies of your past, of people have told you things of who you are or what you've done, and there's things about your past that you feel like, I can't overcome that. Jesus says, I laid my life down so you wouldn't have to live in the fear of your past ever again. Maybe for some of you it's the fear of your present. Maybe you set up camp inside of the valley. You've owned it. And you say, well, nothing will ever change. This is my life, story of my life, whatever it is. This is it. I might as well get used to it. No, He's saying you can make it through. This is not your permanent address. Man, this is just your temporary location. Man, you're going to walk through this. You don't have to fear the circumstances of your present, or for worse, maybe for some of you it's the future. I don't know if my marriage is going to work. I don't know if my kids are, I don't know what's going to happen to them. I don't know what's going to happen to this. I don't know what's going to happen to the country. I don't know whatever thing you could be. I don't know if I'm going to lose my job. All these things about the future. You don't have to be afraid of the future. You don't have to live in fear because Jesus laid his life down. So you wouldn't have to live in fear. And the greatest, and look, those are all great, serious things. But some of us, there's greater fears that the Lord wants to deal with you, and it's this. The fear of, will I ever be loved? Do I matter? Can I change? The fear, will I ever be free? And the number one fear that you never have to deal with is, when you place your faith in Jesus, the ultimate fear. Will I be in heaven? Where will I be? Where will I be when I die? Not even that. He laid his life down so you wouldn't have to live in fear. So I ask you to tell you once again, don't hold on to your fears. Cast all of your fears and your cares on Christ. And declare with me, he will carry you through.